Take a look at stocks. They are on the rise. Investors are holding out that a trade deal is still possible. The past 72 hours have been dizzying for the U.S. and China relations. Donald Trump has flip-flopped on trade and tariffs all weekend long, ramping up tensions and then cooling them down.
I have no choice because we're not going to lose close to $1 trillion a year to China. And China understands that.
Are you going to declare a national emergency on China?
Well, I have the right to. If I want, I could declare a national emergency.
And any second thoughts on escalating the trade war with China?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Second thoughts?
Might as well. Might as well. China called last night our top trade people and said, let's get back to the table. So we'll be getting back to the table. Very, very good calls, very productive calls. They mean business. They want to be able to make a deal.
You can't make a 50-50 deal. This has to be a deal that's better for us. And if it's not better, let's not do business together. Sorry, it's the way I negotiate.
If that's the way the president negotiates, it's causing consternation for investors. William Foster is Moody's vice president and lead U.S. analyst. He is in New York. Sir, a really straightforward, simple question. What is it that the markets don't like about the way Donald Trump is conducting his negotiations?
Well, markets don't like uncertainty and confusion, and that is what's obviously we had quite a lot of that over the weekend. Until there's some kind of clarity on potential resolution of a trade deal, a path forward that's clear and somewhat predictable, I think investors are going to continue to be on the back foot and potentially caught off guard, given the tit for tat that we're seeing between the U.S. and China, and they don't like that.
And it's not just on tariffs, is it? Taxes as well. Nobody has any certainty where the US, or where the president, I should say, is going to fall on any policy, because there doesn't seem to be any recognized process for making those decisions, or at least orthodox process.
Well, there's a whole lot of uncertainty across the board, I'd say, with regards to the economy, fiscal policy. You referred to taxes. I mean, one good thing that you have in the U.S. is there was a budget deal that was reached for 2 years, along with the debt ceiling that was lifted. So that's on the domestic front a good stabilization that we have moving forward. But much of the uncertainty has to do with the external environment. Any lack of clarity on taxes really has to do with a response to the uncertainty in the markets and the potential for continuing slowdown in the U.S. economy and concerns about a recession, because that would be a fiscal stimulus that would offset that. But of course, then we have the Fed as well that's trying to deal with this on the monetary policy side of things. So it just creates a whole lot of uncertainty across the board.
Right, and in that uncertainty, what do you do? Do you sell or do you just do nothing?
Well, we're not in the business of providing advice on selling or buying, but obviously moving forward, people need to be patient, I guess, if they believe that ultimately a deal will be reached, or if it's in the best interest of both parties. We believe that ultimately the U.S. is not going to go into recession, that the economy will grow by about 2.3% this year and around 1.7% next year. But the risks are rising of further slowdown and potentially, if things are across the board, in the worst case scenario, have the hardened stance. We have 25% tariffs across the board on all imports from China, potentially worse, auto tariffs in the U.S. That would be a more difficult position for investors, but fundamentally we think that the U.S. will continue to grow and eventually they'll work through this issue.
Could the president create the self-fulfilling policy prophecy from the Fed that he wishes if he makes it so difficult? I mean, Powell said we can deal with most things with monetary policy, but not international trade policy. Monetary policy is not equipped for that. But if the US economy is starting to go down the tubes, or at least slowing down dramatically, then the Fed will have to cut.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Fed has been very clear that they'll do whatever they need to do to extend the expansion, and the biggest risk to that right now is external and trade policy in particular. So, they'll need to cut to offset the weight that's being put on the global economy and the U.S. economy from all this uncertainty around trade policy. How much they'll need to cut is really an open question, but certainly they'll need to be accommodative, as they said.
Right, now, taking what Bullard and others said in their Jackson Hole speeches, that monetary policy is clearly in a new realm than it was. Do you believe that a percent off interest rates, if you cut 2 or 3 more times, you take them down to 1% on the official rate, do you believe that makes any difference in terms of whether or not it juices up the economy to any extent?
Well, it'll certainly provide some kind of stimulus in terms of access to liquidity and cheaper borrowing costs. But this really isn't fundamentally an issue about the cost of capital. So, ultimately there's some kind of diminishing returns, I'd say, over time for how much more and more interest rates will be able to contribute if the downside risks really have to do with uncertainty around business planning and supply chain management and much bigger picture issues than interest rates can ultimately deal with.
William Foster, good to see you, sir. As always, I appreciate you taking time
Thanks
to talk to us. Thank you.